Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today, we will look at the use of option buttons. We're going to create a form today with two collections of option buttons. Option buttons, which are sometimes called radio buttons, can be grouped together so that if you have three option buttons, only one button can be pushed in at any one time. If you push one button in, any button which is already pushed in will pop out. So in the Forms Designer, we're going to design a small form to have two collections of option buttons. Now these are the option buttons in the toolkit. We're going to add three option buttons. And another three, which we'll have as a second group. And we're going to add some buttons onto this. And we'll add a status bar at the bottom of the form so we can actually display some information. So, having just put the option buttons on the screen, there are a couple of things we'll need to do. We want these option buttons to be treated as separate items. So, if we click on our first option button and go into the styles, and we will tick WS group to indicate this is the first option button in a group. We will also do the same for the option 4, which is the first one in a second group. We will save that and we will try it out. There's a test dialog button which is very useful in the forms to try out your dialog. So in here we can click any one of these first and only one of the three will actually be selected. If we click on the second one, only one of the second group can be selected, which is just what we're after. Let's go back and look at the code. So if we look at the main dialog itself, we will see that we have our option buttons going in. The first option button has some extra values set, including the WS group which we set, and the same for the option 4, which is the first option in the second collection of buttons. So in our event handler, we have an entry for each of the objects we've created. Now, you'll notice that when we've run the application, none of the switches are turned on. You can, however, go in and set them independently. However, what if we want to set one of the options in each of these groups to be the default option? How do we do that? Well, let's have a look at our event handler. Right at the beginning of the initialize dialog, we can put a command in to set our initial setting for each of the groups. I'm going to use the prefix command here to save a little bit of typing. So we're going to do a control set option on the dialog, and we need to give it the handle now of what we want to set. So we want to set option 1 and option 4 as being the buttons being set. Now the way this actually operates, what you need to do is, as well as telling it which option you wish to set, you need to tell it the range that the group is actually set up for, option 1 to option 3. And in here, it's option 4 to option 6. Now, you'll notice that when these constants are set up at the beginning of your program, the constants are sequential numbers. In other words, this is a range of numbers for the group. should you wish to add another option to the first group, you would have to do some renumbering in here to make sure the option buttons work correctly. So if we run this code now, we would find that option 1 and option 4 are now preset for us. It still allows us to change them, but anytime the application is run, our presets are set up for us. So, having done that, can we read the value in any of these options to see which one the user has actually set? Well, let's have a look at our event handler again. Well, let's go in and do some renaming of our buttons. Let's change this to, say, option 3. We'll change this, say, option 4. And we'll make these two buttons read option. So there we are. So if we save that, now what we want it to do is when we actually run the program, I want when the user clicks on set option 3, I want option 3 here to be selected. And in doing that, option 1 would automatically be unselected. So this is our first button, so this is button 1. So let's go into button 1, into the event handler, and make some changes. So in here, we want to do a control set option command. And it takes a number of parameters, the first being the handle of the dialog, the second being the option we wish to select, and in which case this is going to be option 3. And just as we did before, we need to put in the range of the group. So we're setting option 3 as being set, and the range is from option 1 to option 3. So if we run this now, we would see when we click on here, option 3 becomes set. Regardless of what option is actually set, clicking the button would set the option to number 3, which is perfect. We can do exactly the same for the third button. And we're setting option 4 here, and it is going from 4 to 6. There we go. And these two groups are working quite independently of each other, which is just what we want. Having done that, how do we read the value that a user has actually set? We're going to use the second and fourth buttons for that option. So this one here is going to be used to read the settings. Now, the mechanism by which you work out which of the 3 option buttons the user has selected is to test each of the buttons one by one to see if it's been set. And then whatever one's been set, that's the one the user clicked on. So since you may be doing a lot of this testing of radio buttons, option buttons, we're going to create a little standard function to perform that function for you. So we'll create a variable first of all, which is going to hold which selection has been made. str selection will be that variable. So str selection is going to be equal to the output from our new function. And this will be a generic function that can be used for any collection of radio buttons. So we're going to have to give it some parameters. First of all, the handle to the dialog, and we'll also want to give it the range that we want to look at. In this case, we're looking at the range from option 1 to option 3. And then whatever it brings back, we will put in our status bar at the bottom of the screen. And And that's our status bar there. So, when the button is actually clicked, we will call this new function, which we will create in a moment. And this function will return a string, which we will set at the bottom of the screen. So it will put the value and the word selected. So let's create this new function. We have the handle to the dialog first. And we want two additional variables. We'll call one long start. And we'll call the other one long end. Now, as I said, in order to actually determine which of the radio buttons, and it may not be 3, it could be 5 or 10 radio buttons, we want to actually run through them from the long start to the long end to figure out which one has actually been selected. Now, as these are option buttons, they can only be one of them selected in the group. So you don't have to worry about 2 being selected. So we'll create some local variables. We're going to be running through this in a for next loop, so we'll use long R for our loop counter. We need to work out the state of each button, and we need to pass back whether it's been selected or not. So first is our for next loop. So what we need to do first of all is to get the value of the radio button, the option button. So we use a control get. Now, you may have thought that since we use a control set option to set it, we would use a control get option to get it. But it's actually control get check. The same function is actually used for checkboxes as radio buttons. So we're getting the value from the dialog, from the control on the screen, we're passing it to the variable long state. Now, if long state equals 1, it will mean that the option button has been selected. So what we're going to do, we're going to use another control get command to get the text which is actually on that option button. As we called our option buttons option 1, 2 and 3, it will then return that piece of text. If you name your option buttons as in, for example, what colour eyes someone has, blue, green or brown, then whatever they select, it would return the word blue, green or brown, because that's the text you put on each of the option buttons. So we will simply set the return of the function to be the name of text that is actually sitting on the option button. And at that point, there's no point going through any more option buttons because we know only one can be selected. So at that point, we can exit the function. And if we get down to the bottom, then nothing has been selected, which is quite possible. If we set our dialog to display the option buttons as unselected at the beginning, then it's possible that the user has not clicked on any of them to pick it. So if they haven't, we'll return no selection. And that's it. So quick compile to make sure that compiles. Oh, we missed out the equals. Selection. Yes, we misspelled it. It's selection. Right, okay, so let's try that now. And of course it's returning a string. What would we do without compilers? Right, okay. So we can quite happily select each of the groups. We know this works. We can use our buttons to set the values. So we can click on read. It tells us that option 3 is selected. So if we select option 1, it tells us it's option 1. In our second one, we haven't put any code in, but we'll just paste the code in for that one as well. In our event handler, so we sent our first one up here, So we'll just copy that piece of code, and down here we will paste in our code. Now in here the range is going to be from 4 to 6, and exactly the same function should work perfectly well if we put the endif in. So there we go. So for our second one, we can quite happily set the options. Our read option tells us option 4 selected, option 5, and option 6. So what we've achieved today is we've put two sets of option or radio buttons on the screen, which work quite independently of each other. The user can only select one at a time. We can set the option using our set option button, and we can read the option that the user has actually selected by use of a generic function. So you'll find option buttons very useful when the user has to make a single selection. That's it for today. Thank you for watching.